Welcome back to Investing Talk podcast. Today we're looking into D-Wave Quantum.
D-Wave Quantum.
Yeah, they've been making a lot of noise in quantum computing lately.
Yeah.
And, their stock's been kind of all over the place recently.
It has, yeah.
So we're going to try to unpack what's behind these fluctuations and try to help you understand if QBTS is a buy or, should you stay away from.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really fascinating because, on the one hand, you look at them and you're like, wow, these guys are pioneers,
Yeah.
I mean, they were the world's first commercial supplier of quantum computers. Like, how crazy is that?
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they launched back in 2007, which is, that was forever ago in technology years, especially, given that quantum computing still feels so new.
Right.
It's pretty wild. And then you look at what they have today, and they've got this massive 5,000 qubit system, the Advantage system,
Yes.
the biggest commercially available quantum computer out there.
It's incredible. Like 5,000 qubits. It's like, you always think, oh, quantum computing is this thing of the future. And it's like, well, no, it's here. And they've got 5,000 qubits.
Right.
It's just wild. But, then you look at their financials and things get a little less exciting.
A little bit, yeah.
They reported a net loss of $22.7 million last quarter. Their overall revenue is down. Their stock price is taking a hit, dropping almost 28% from recent highs.
Yeah, you're right. Those numbers, they've definitely made some investors a little bit nervous, but, it's not the whole picture. We've got to look at the reasons behind these figures. For example, the overall revenue decrease is actually impacted by the strategic shift D-Wave is making towards a subscription-based model. This quantum computing as a service, QCS.
Right, QCSS. Yeah, so they're moving towards a model that we've seen a lot in tech, right?
Right, exactly.
But, is it the right move for a company working with such a cutting-edge technology?
That's a great question. It's a really good question. And it could be. It could provide more stable revenue in the long run, but it also makes them reliant on these sustained customer subscriptions.
Right.
But, there's more good news. D-Wave has secured substantial funding, like serious funding. We're talking $175 million through equity offerings.
Wow. That suggests that somebody out there is pretty confident that they're going to, they're going to make it, right?
Yeah, there's, somebody out there who's seeing a bright future for D-Wave, even despite these recent losses. It's a mixed bag.
It really is.
That's where things get interesting for investors. Is this a sign of confidence in D-Wave's long-term potential, or is this a company just desperately trying to stay afloat?
All right, so let's unpack that.
Okay.
Let's talk about what this funding actually means for D-Wave. What does it mean for them to have this money?
Well, it gives them breathing room, right? They have that cash on hand to continue innovating, and that is absolutely vital in a field that's as fast-paced as quantum computing. But it also raises questions like, is this funding going to be enough to get them to profitability? Or are they going to have to raise more capital?
Yeah.
And then potentially that's going to further dilute the value of the existing shares.
It's always interesting to me when a company secures funding. It's like, okay, where is that money going?
Yeah.
Like, what are you actually spending this money on? What are your goals?
Yeah.
What are you doing with it?
I'm sure a big chunk of that money is going towards research and development.
Right.
D-Wave is in this constant race to improve their technology, increase their qubit count, make those quantum computers more powerful, more reliable.
And, of course, attract the talent.
All right, absolutely.
Like, you need to bring in the best people if you're going to.
The best minds in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those people know their worth.
Absolutely.
They don't come cheap. So, while this funding round is definitely a positive sign, it is crucial to keep an eye on how D-Wave is managing their expenses. Are they spending wisely? Are they, burning through that cash too quickly?
Right. It's that classic balance.
Yeah.
You got to invest for the future, but you also got to make sure that you can, make payroll.
Exactly. And to really understand if this funding is a good sign for D-Wave, we need to look beyond just the numbers. We got to delve into the specifics of their business model, their strategic partnerships, and that competitive landscape of the quantum computing market.
And speaking of partnerships, D-Wave has teamed up with some serious players, MasterCard, Siemens, Lockheed Martin. These aren't...
Those are big names.
Yeah, these aren't small potatoes.
No.
So, what are they doing with these partnerships?
These partnerships, I think, are a really key part of D-Wave's strategy. They're not just building quantum computers, they are actively seeking ways to apply this technology to real-world problems, and they're doing that through these partnerships.
Right. And for example, MasterCard, they're exploring how to use D-Wave's quantum computers for payment security and fraud detection.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a huge market if they can figure that out.
It's a huge market. And Siemens, they're interested in optimizing complex industrial processes
Right.
like energy production, distribution, things like that. So, these partnerships really do show that these major companies, they are taking D-Wave seriously, and they're seeing that potential in quantum annealing to solve some of their really, really tough challenges.
Okay, so we've got partnerships that are promising. They secured significant funding, but they are still operating at a loss. I mean, is this the classic high-risk, high-reward investment?
I think that's a great way to put it, and that is the million-dollar question that investors need to wrestle with. Are they comfortable with that risk? Because while the potential rewards of quantum computing are enormous, the road to profitability is going to be long and probably bumpy.
Yeah. And there's just no guarantee that D-Wave is going to be the one that makes it, right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, let's dig into those risks a little bit. What are some of the red flags that investors should be thinking about when it comes to D-Wave?
Well, one thing that's been raising some eyebrows is the insider selling. When you see people within the company starting to sell off their shares,
Yeah.
it can be a sign that they're not as confident in the company's future as maybe they once were.
Right. But, I mean, couldn't that also just be personal financial needs?
Oh, absolutely. It's not always a clear signal. It's not
Right.
you have to look at the context. If you see multiple insiders selling large chunks of stock,
Right.
that might be a little bit more of a concern than a single insider just, selling a small portion of their holdings.
Yeah. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
It is.
So what else? What else is on the list of potential red flags?
Well, the fact that a significant portion of that $175 million in funding came from selling more stock.
Right.
While it does give them cash in the short term, it also dilutes the value of the existing shares.
Yeah. So it helps them survive, but it also might affect me if I'm holding shares.
Exactly. And on top of that, we've seen some analysts lower their revenue projections for D-Wave, which just kind of adds to the overall uncertainty surrounding the company's future.
So we have these potential red flags, but at the same time, we have this company that has been doing this for almost 20 years.
Right.
They've got this incredible 5,000 qubit system. They're partnering with all these giants. I mean, how do we reconcile those two things? How do we square that circle?
Yeah, it's definitely a puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's what makes investing so intriguing. You have to kind of weigh the potential upside against the risk and try to make an informed decision based on, all of those factors.
And I think a big part of making that decision is really understanding, the technology itself.
Yeah.
What exactly is quantum annealing?
Right.
How does that differ from other approaches to quantum computing?
Yeah.
And more importantly, why should, Joe investor care about that?
That's the question. And to answer it, we need to take a step back and just, kind of try to understand the basics of quantum computing in general.
All right, let's do it. Let's explore this fascinating world.
So quantum annealing, right? We were talking about the importance of understanding D-Wave's technology, quantum annealing, and how it kind of fits into this big world of quantum computing.
Right, because it's not the only game in town. We hear about, IBM, we hear about Google, and they're making these big strides in quantum computing, but it's a different approach.
It is, yeah. Those guys are focused on what's called gate-based quantum computing, or sometimes called universal quantum computing.
Okay.
It's kind of, if you want to think about it, it's like the difference between like a Swiss Army knife and a specialized tool.
Okay.
So gate-based quantum computing is theoretically more versatile, right? It can handle a wider range of problems. It's the kind of approach that, has that potential to like break encryption, revolutionize drug discovery, even simulate the universe, like the really big stuff.
Yeah, the really big, crazy stuff.
Yeah, mind-blowing stuff.
Okay, so where does D-Wave's quantum annealing fit into all of this?
So quantum annealing is a little bit more specialized. It's really good at solving a particular type of problem called optimization. And optimization is basically, trying to find the best possible solution out of like tons and tons of possibilities.
Okay, give me an example. Like, how would that work in the real world? Like something our listeners might actually encounter.
Okay, imagine you're a logistics company, right? And you're trying to plan the most efficient delivery route for a fleet of trucks.
Yeah.
You've got hundreds of deliveries to make. You've got all these different trucks. You got to think about traffic patterns, time constraints. Like, how do you do that?
Right.
How do you find the absolute best route that's going to, like, minimize your fuel costs, minimize your delivery time? That's a really complex optimization problem.
Right.
And that's where quantum annealing is just, like, it excels.
So it's like having a super-powered GPS, basically, for these companies.
Exactly. It's like, GPS on steroids or something.
Okay, so it's not just logistics. I mean, what else? What other applications are there?
Oh, there's tons. I mean, you think about portfolio management and finance. You think about protein folding and drug discovery. Like, anytime you've got a problem where you're trying to find, like, the absolute best solution out of a zillion possibilities, that's where quantum annealing can really shine.
Okay, so it sounds like, well, gate-based quantum computing is going for that, kind of like that big vision of solving all these different problems. D-Wave is focusing on this one specific but very important type of problem.
Exactly. They're like, we're going to be the best at optimization, and we're going to solve that for everybody.
Right. Okay, and they've been doing it for a while, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about, like, they've been in the game since 2007. They've got a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, they have a ton of experience. And that 5,000 qubit system that they have, that gives them a big leg up, in terms of scale. Like, nobody else has anything close to that right now.
Right. But is that putting all their eggs in one basket?
Wow.
Like, is it risky to just focus on quantum annealing?
It's a fair question. I mean, gate-based quantum computing, it's getting a ton of attention, tons of investment. It's possible that it could eventually catch up to or even surpass quantum annealing when it comes to solving these optimization problems.
Right.
D-Wave's betting that their specialization is going to give them that long-term edge, but it's a bet, and it's something that investors need to really think about.
So for our listeners who are out there thinking about maybe, adding QBTS to their portfolio, what should they be watching for? What are some things that they should be paying attention to?
I think one of the big things is their customer base.
Okay.
Are they attracting new customers?
Right.
Are those existing customers renewing their subscriptions?
Right.
That's going to tell us a lot about, the real world demand for this technology.
And I imagine their partnerships are going to be a big part of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, keep an eye on those new partnerships, new collaborations, especially in different industries. If they can, show that they're getting into all these different areas, that's a good sign that they're diversifying and reaching new markets.
So even if quantum annealing doesn't become, this all-encompassing solution for everything, if they can really corner the market on optimization problems, that could still be a big win.
Totally. It's all about finding their niche and just becoming the dominant player in that space.
Right. Okay, so we've got a sense of the technology, we've got a sense of the business model, but let's zoom out a little bit. Let's talk about, like, the market overall.
Yeah.
How big is the quantum computing market, and how fast is it growing?
Well, it's still pretty small, but it is projected to just explode in the coming years.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking about, some analysts are saying it could be a market worth hundreds of billions of dollars by the end of this decade.
Wow.
So huge potential, but obviously, even with that kind of growth, it's not a guarantee that everybody's going to win.
Right, so understanding the competition is going to be really important.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about the competition. We mentioned IBM, we mentioned Google. Who else is D-Wave going up against?
Well, there are a number of other players out there. One company that's worth keeping an eye on is Rigetti Computing.
Okay.
They're also working on these gate-based quantum computers, and they've been making, some really interesting inroads, especially in the financial industry.
Okay. And then, of course, there's IonQ. They're doing something completely different, right?
Yeah, completely different. They're using trapped ions as their qubits. It's a whole other, beast, basically.
Right, and it's hard to say who's gonna win, right?
Way too early to tell.
Like, it's a horse race, right?
It is, yeah. It's a total horse race. And each company is kind of like, trying to pull ahead with their own little strategy, their own unique approach.
Right, so investors have to be aware of all these different approaches and how they might play out in the long run.
Exactly. Because, if D-Wave's quantum annealing technology hits a wall, they might find themselves falling behind.
Right, so it's not just about understanding D-Wave, it's about understanding the whole quantum computing landscape.
It is. It's about understanding the whole ecosystem. And that brings us to another really important consideration: government involvement.
Oh, right. Governments are getting involved in this big time, right? I mean, they're throwing a lot of money at quantum computing.
They are, yeah. Governments around the world are investing heavily in quantum computing research and development. They recognize how strategically important this technology is going to be.
Right.
And they're pouring billions and billions of dollars into it. I mean, that government funding, it's driving a lot of innovation, it's accelerating the pace of development, but it's also creating this, like, very complex web of partnerships and alliances.
Right, because you've got governments working with universities, they're working with startups, they're working with, these big tech giants.
Exactly. And it's a lot to keep track of, but it's important for investors to understand how these government initiatives might impact the companies that they're thinking about investing in. Like if a company gets a big government contract, that could give them a huge advantage in the market.
Right, so it's another layer to add to our analysis of D-Wave.
Exactly. And it really just highlights the fact that, investing in a company like D-Wave, it's not just about betting on the company, it's about betting on the future of this entire industry.
Right, and that future is still very much being written.
Very much so. Yeah, there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
There are a lot of potential, twists and turns ahead, but that's also what makes it so exciting.
All right, so we've talked about the technology, the competition, the market, government involvement. But before we wrap up here, I want to bring it back to D-Wave's stock price, QBTS. We know it's been volatile, but what are some of the things that could really move the needle for them in the coming months or years? What should investors be paying attention to?
I think one of the biggest catalysts would be like a major breakthrough in their technology.
Right.
Like if they can significantly increase their qubit count, if they can improve the performance of their quantum computers, or if they can, demonstrate some like brand new groundbreaking application for quantum annealing, that would definitely get investors excited.
Okay. And I imagine, news related to like how they're going to make money.
Yeah, the path to profitability.
Yeah.
If they can show a clear roadmap to profitability, that would be huge. That would be a huge boost for their stock price.
So investors should keep their ears to the ground for any news about technological advancements, partnerships, financial performance, all of that.
All of that, absolutely. And they should also pay attention to just the overall market sentiment towards quantum computing in general.
Yeah.
If investors get more risk averse or if there's like a major setback in the field, that could hurt D-Wave's stock price, regardless of how well they're actually doing.
So it's high risk, high reward. Investors need to be aware of the potential, but also be ready for the volatility that comes with being in a space like this.
Exactly. Investing in quantum computing, it's not for the faint of heart, but for those who really believe in the transformative potential of this technology, it could be a very rewarding journey.
All right, well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. It's been a fascinating look at D-Wave Quantum, their technology, and this exciting world of quantum computing.
I agree. It's definitely a company and an industry to keep an eye on.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about D-Wave and their quantum annealing technology.
We have.
But it's not the only approach to quantum computing.
No, it's not. There's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, as they say.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these other companies and their strategies. We touched on IBM and Google, but I think it would be good to dive a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. IBM has been in the game for a long time. They've put a lot of money into R&D, and they've got this platform, IBM Quantum, that's all about this gate-based approach.
And remind us again how gate-based quantum computing differs from D-Wave's quantum annealing.
Okay, so remember how we were talking about quantum annealing being like a racehorse that's bred for a very specific kind of race?
Right.
It's amazing at optimization problems, but not as versatile.
Right. So it's a specialist.
Exactly. And gate-based quantum computing is more like a thoroughbred that can potentially win a bunch of different races. It's more general purpose, and in theory, it can solve a much wider range of problems.
But you said, in theory, is there a catch?
Well, yeah, these gate-based quantum computers are a lot harder to build and control. The qubits are more fragile, and they make more errors. It's a huge engineering challenge.
So IBM is putting their chips on this more versatile but more difficult approach.
They are. And they've made some impressive progress. They've built quantum computers with over 100 qubits, and they're working on scaling up even further.
And what about Google? Where do they fit into all of this?
Oh, Google's another big player. They're also going with gate-based quantum computing, and they've gotten a lot of attention for saying they've achieved quantum supremacy.
Right, that was a big deal. We
Right.
talked about that earlier. It basically means they built a quantum computer that can beat even the most powerful regular computer on some tasks.
Exactly. It was a huge milestone, but there's still some debate about whether they've really achieved it.
So there's kind of a quantum rivalry going on between IBM and Google.
You could say that, yeah. They're both trying to be the leader in this gate-based quantum computing world, and they're pushing each other to innovate faster.
Okay, so we've got these giants in the ring, but what about smaller companies? Are there any up-and-comers that could shake things up?
Oh, absolutely. There are some really interesting startups out there. One that comes to mind is Rigetti Computing.
Okay.
They're also working on gate-based quantum computers, and they're really focused on making their technology accessible to businesses through the cloud.
So they want to make it easier for companies to try out quantum computing and actually use it.
Exactly. That's a smart move because one of the biggest hurdles right now is actually using this technology for real-world problems.
Right, it's not enough to just build these amazing machines. You have to show companies how to use them to solve their problems.
Exactly. And that's what Rigetti is trying to do. They're building the software and the ecosystem to make quantum computing more user-friendly.
So it's not just about the hardware. It's about the whole package.
It's about the whole ecosystem. And that's something investors should really think about when they're looking at companies in this space. It's not just about how many qubits they have or whether they've achieved quantum supremacy. It's about their overall strategy, their partnerships, their team, and their vision for the future of quantum computing.
So it sounds like there's a lot of opportunity in this market, but also a lot of risk. It's a complicated landscape with different technologies and approaches and a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But that's also what makes it so exciting. We're seeing a whole new industry being born, one that could completely change the world as we know it.
And for investors who are willing to do their research and take on some risk, the rewards could be huge.
They could be. But it's important to remember that this is a long game. Quantum computing is still in its early stages, and it's going to take time for the market to mature and for the winners to emerge.
So patience is key.
Absolutely. And a willingness to learn and adapt as the technology keeps developing.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. It's been a fascinating journey exploring D-Wave, their technology, and this whole quantum computing world.
It has been. It's such a fascinating space with so much potential.
So to wrap things up, we've learned that quantum computing is an exciting field with a lot of promise. D-Wave is a pioneer in this space with its focus on quantum annealing, but they face competition from companies like IBM and Google, who are pursuing a different approach called gate-based quantum computing. The market is still young, but it's growing rapidly, and there's a lot of uncertainty about which companies will come out on top.
And we've also talked about the importance of understanding the broader ecosystem, the partnerships, the government involvement, and the different factors that could impact a company's success in this space.
So for investors who are interested in this space, it's important to do your research, understand the different approaches, and be prepared for a bumpy ride.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but for those who believe in the power of this technology, it could be an incredible journey.
Thank you for joining us today on Investing Talk Podcast. We hope you found this discussion insightful, and we encourage you to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave us a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you.